everyone survived our weather from this past week. It was rather treacherous at times, particularly down in Griffin. They lost the Walgreens and the Hobby Lobby down there. I understand the Walgreens got picked up and moved about a block. And it's been
That was right there on the corner.
and so it's been a eventful week for some of us. We kind of kept an eye on the weather at the house, but fortunately it went way south of us and kind of went off down south and across. But I guess you saw the pictures from Salem, Alabama. That was total devastation. And then we saw some of the footage from Griffin on TV and so forth. Yeah. And that was...
Well, where did you hear that weather report you were telling us about this morning? Was that on?
Which weather report?
The one where you said it's going to be so cold?
It's cold in here.
Here. I couldn't hear you back there.
Yeah, I was talking about
It's cold in here?
It's cold in here. Like last week we froze.
When you go outside.
If you had hot flashes like I do, you wouldn't be cold. I didn't know it was cold.
But no, I was talking about how cold it is in this room. There's like a
Hang in there.
8 to 10 degree difference in the weather between here and going out that door. Me and David worked on it, looked at it some last week, and I called the church office and we talked about it. So anyway, they're aware of the situation in this room, and so hopefully they're going to look at it and we'll see where we're getting into. So I'll keep everyone updated as far as where we're going to meet. We'll probably have more definite next Sunday as to which room we'll meet in for our get together and so forth. So just stay tuned and be thinking about what you want to bring. I was planning to bring lasagna, but we can bring something else if we need to. I don't know. I sort of thought chicken went with everything, but
But that's
It does.
down here in the south, up north. Up north, we always had chicken with vegetables.
Don't pay attention to that.
You know, it doesn't matter.
I know it.
It
well, I started to
doesn't
say,
matter. Whatever.
potluck dinner.
Potluck.
Okay. Well, then I'm still bringing my lasagna.
Good, I wanna have some.
So,
Tracy, I'll bring a big pot of green beans, then we'll have a bench.
Cornbread too.
Yes.
She makes
But
the
we-
best cornbread, better than Martha Stewart or anybody in the United States. She makes the best.
who does? Oh, Betty? Oh, absolutely.
Betty does.
Oh, yeah. We got to have some cornbread.
She made it for dinner.
Cornbread and lasagna it works great.
She made some real
Of course,
good
I'm-
chicken soup and
But,
Chicken soup.
cornbread and, oh, it was so good.
And the beef.
but anyway, but we'll start planning and we'll have potluck and we'll have something.
That's fun.
Hey Gerald,
Yes.
we always had somebody in charge. Ruth was always in charge, remember? And she kind of asked us what we could bring. Do y'all remember that? When Ruth was in charge. So can we have somebody in charge like?
I can't read my own writing, let alone write.
Oh, you just went, well,
I nominate Debbie.
But we don't wanna bring the same thing.
I second it.
Okay, well,
I thought
Debbie
we
did
did
a good job.
I think
That's a great
Linda's got
job.
a good point, an excellent point, because you can't have anything without a leader, a point person.
Well, I
To be
think primarily what
successful.
she's after is we don't have two or three people reading the
That's
same
right, that's
thing.
right.
That's right. I
That's
think
why I'm
that's-
saying if one person like Linda would do it,
No, I can't, please, I got too much on my mind. But I recommend Debbie or Debbie.
All in favor, Debbie, say aye.
Aye.
Debbie did.
Okay.
Thank you, Debbie.
It's only a
My
list.
bad, my
Okay,
bad
Debbie.
ear went out on that. I didn't hear that at all.
Okay. Real quick, last week, I passed out this wonderful little chart. And I wanted to bring a couple of things. She needs one. Who?
I didn't get one.
Oh, I thought I gave. I'm sorry.
We need some extra one.
They need one too.
a couple there.
Yeah.
We just, we left it in the truck.
Betty, did you get one? You didn't give me one?
I think And I guess Mary Ellen didn't get one.
She's got one.
I have one.
this morning.
Yeah. You didn't give her one last week for me.
Who? She wasn't here last week.
She-
That's right.
You don't keep up with your mother very well, do you?
No, she's rarely gone. She's rarely absent.
Well, I knew that whatever it was important.
It was
So,
paramount.
yes, family is. Anyway, back to my chart. If you notice, last week we were in John chapter 4, and if you look through, you can see sort of what's going on. When we get to John chapter 5, you see, conflict with the Jews. I'm looking at the top. People's unbelief intensifying. So, as we progress through this, you're going to see, that some of Jesus' disciples start moving away. You have the Son of God, he's doing miracles, but they start moving away. And in the optional home Bible study for this coming week, there's 2 why questions related to this. So I just want to kind of get you, you have the Son of God here, he's doing miracles, and now suddenly people are walking away, leaving. Why? And it's the same thing today. You have people that say they're following Jesus, and then all of a sudden they disappear, and you never see them again. Nothing's changed in over 2,000 years. People start following and then fall away. So just realize this and be, thinking about this, because I asked 2 why questions this coming week for you to think about. And I realize there's about 16 of us, and I'm going to get 16 different answers. But I think we need to think about why people stop following Jesus. He gives us eternal life, and yet we walk away. Why? Why do we do that? It's very interesting how, how people's thinking is. Why would they do that?
It's the selfish nature of people.
I think.
That we were born, we were born in sin, and there's 2 powers at work in everybody's life.
That's right.
The enemy and the power of God, and it's which one overwhelms the other. That's my explanation.
I think that they walk away from church. They stop going to church one day, one
Speak
week,
up.
one week, and then another week, and little by little. And we have people that walk in the door that tell us these things, that they just got out of the habit. Something else was priority. And I think that has a lot to do with it, little by little, and they're not in the Bible, they're not getting it spiritual. Maybe stay, watching on TV.
A lot of people think they can go to church on TV now. It's very convenient to think that.
Yeah, but there's, and I think I agree with some of what Glenda was saying, that people need to read their Bible daily and pray daily and so forth. And sometimes it's easy to miss, a couple of Sundays. But if I'm gone 2 Sundays in a row, I feel a void,
Yes.
if I'm not in here fellowshipping, with you folks.
And I think what Craig was just preaching on, about walking away, just walking away from being around the people that you associate with, having friends in church.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to do because there's so much on the outside.
Oh, yeah,
To
there's,
do that we're involved with people that are not Christians. And,
correct.
I think a lot recently is the pandemic, when everything was shut down and closed down and uncertain. We're gonna meet, where we're gonna meet, and, what time. I mean, there was a lot of uncertainty, and so people just started.
And a lot of fear.
To stay home.
Oh, yeah,
They're
and
getting-
fear is a big motivator in situations
And
like
so
the pandemic.
once, like Glenda said, once you get into that habit, then you think, well, I was doing okay here at the house. I'm still I'm still reading my Bible and watching TV.
Biggest thing I learned from that pandemic thing is the government can shut down churches, because they did it for a couple of weeks. Several churches after that started saying we're going back, but it proves that government can do it if they want to, and eventually I think that'll happen.
I do too. I think we need to
Not
cherish.
in my lifetime, but I think it'll happen.
I think we need to cherish what we've got here, right here in this room, in this
Absolutely.
whole roof.
And I appreciate what Betty Norton said this morning as well. Me and Gary had many, many conversations at his house when I was working with Gary, and so I do appreciate what Betty said, and I understand, where she's coming from and so forth. We're in John chapter 5, lesson 7 in the book. Now, this is a hot topic among some people. And I'll just say that right up front, because we're going to deal with some things that today people, first of all, don't want to hear, and some people just totally deny it. And I think the Word of God's pretty clear. Verse 1, after this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now, we don't know which feast it is. John doesn't tell us this time, but there's a lot of speculation, but that's not the important part. The part is Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now, there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porches. Now, when I was in Israel, the sheep gate was closed, and that whole area was totally inaccessible. But our tour guide did give us information about the structure there and what was there and what they believed about the pool at Bethesda. So it is a real place. There were underground springs that fed this particular pool. In these lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first after the swirling of the water was made well of whatever disease he had. Now, first of all, the last half of verse 3 and all of verse 4 is not in the earliest Greek manuscripts. It's only found in the later manuscripts. It's totally missing in some of the better Greek manuscripts. That whole part about the angel and stuff is not there. There's a lot of controversy about that among scholars. Even the early church fathers had a lot to say about this. The best explanation is it was underground springs, and I don't know if you've ever been to some of those healing hot springs, but they have different kinds of salts that come in, and people can get in there and, get in the hot water and so forth, and it has a healing effect. This is what is thought about this particular location. Some kind of mineral came up through the springs at certain times. People would get in and get healed. There's no reason to believe that, this was one of God's angels doing this. That doesn't appear to be what any of the Bible scholars, any of the early church fathers think. They believe that some kind of mineral would come out, they would get in the water and get healed of certain diseases. They don't think everybody got healed, but a lot of them did. So just to be clarifying, because people are constantly thinking, different kinds of miracles. This doesn't appear to be really a miracle. It's just a phenomenon that was happening at that particular time.
But Gerald, if you interpret it different ways, I can only interpret the Bible one way, because this is all I've got. That it's literal the way it is. And there may be disagreements in scholars this and scholars that, but I have to, how do you know when you're reading the Bible, well, it may have happened and it may not, or maybe it didn't happen that way. That bothers me personally.
I think God leads your heart to believe it's true.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's what I think.
I believe that this Bible is the inspired word of God, and that it was written by the Holy Spirit of God, and I trust every word in it just the way it's written. I've got the old King James Version. That's all I've ever gone by, and I don't want any other version. But I understand people, do want more clarification. And, thus we have all the different translations. But how do you pick and choose which is true, which is partly true, how do you do that? How do you have faith if you have to question, is this really what happened? It's not a solid foundation, that's what I'm saying.
Well,
it's not solid that way to me.
Well, you go into, there's 10 different Greek manuscripts that people use.
From the original Hebrew.
No, they think that the Bible, the New Testament, was written in Greek. I disagree, but that's okay. I'll go along with it's written in Greek for now. I believe it's written in Aramaic and translated to Greek. But regardless, there's 10 different Greek manuscripts. All 10 don't agree. So which one is real? Which one is,
That's my point. That's my point.
we've got,
I have to have something I can stand on, you know,
right,
and I choose this.
I understand. So, you know, it goes, you know, to, you know, there's 10 different Greek manuscripts. They all don't agree. So, you know, this is the best that the people could put together. And, you know, that's what we have. And, you know, the word, you know, so, and I understand what you're coming from, Mary Jo. I have a King James that I rely on and so forth, but I also understand, because of my time in seminary, that this is the best we've got, but it may not be the most accurate. I mean, if you take out the last half of 3 and 4, it's, you know, it doesn't make any difference. Jesus still shows up and heals the guy. I'm just saying, you know, people constantly think, well, was that really God? We don't know.
I mean, don't you think maybe a lot of the different denominations of beliefs that we have is because each one of those denominations interpreted the Bible in a different way?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Jehovah's Witness is the prime example.
Yeah,
Catholic.
so that's why I say I have to have something solid to stand on,
Mm-hmm.
not question, and just take. And if I don't understand it, God will reveal it to me. And if if he doesn't, maybe he will later on. That's just me.
No, I understand. I would just, you know, people constantly ask, was that an angel? Don't know. I'm just saying it for Jesus to show up there, kind of interesting. But anyway,
I had a friend that was a minister. He died some years ago, but he only stayed in the King James because his statement was, "The closer to Christ, the more accurate you are." So he stayed with King James Bible.
oh yeah, and there's a lot of people that feel that way, and that's fine.
I use the New King James because it's bigger print.
Some of the versions now, they've gotten so far away from this.
Oh yeah, they
I
have.
mean, some of it's just lies. Really.
Oh, I agree.
For instance, like Mary, the mother of Jesus, is one version that calls her just a young maiden. She wasn't a virgin, giving birth to the only begotten Son of God. I mean, that's what it implies.
Right? Yeah,
Leaving
there's
out the fact that she's a virgin.
the new gender neutral Bible that just came out.
See, and it just goes on and on. And
I mean, where does it end?
yeah, that's my point.
It's the
So-
the times.
So anyway,
Like you said, Dick, the closer to Jesus,
yeah, that's right.
before it got diluted,
That's right.
and it has been diluted.
Yes. Verse 5. Now a certain man was there who had an infirmity for 38 years. Okay, so, we eventually find out how long this gentleman is. We don't know what the infirmity is. But we assume, as we read through this, that he couldn't walk because he's laying down. When Jesus saw him laying there and knew that he already had been in that condition a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" Why do you think Jesus asked him that question?
Test his faith.
He wanted him to confess it with his mouth.
Right. So Jesus asked him, do you want to be made well? You know, do you think there are people that enjoy their infirmity?
Oh, of course.
I mean,
Know of a couple very well enjoy poor health.
And love to talk about it.
yes. And I know I have a friend that is that way. If it well, I'm just gonna say I have someone that's that way. And it's interesting, you know, why they like that. But anyway, verse 7, the sick man answered him, Sir, I have no man to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, another steps in before me. He doesn't answer the question. Jesus says, do you want to be made well? And what does he give him?
An excuse.
An excuse. In other words, why don't you, in other words, Jesus was hoping he would answer the question, but instead he gives him an excuse. Now, as we read through the text, we're going to find out this guy doesn't know who Jesus is. There's some guy coming up here talking to me, and he doesn't realize, you know, exactly who it is. And then Jesus in verse 8 says, rise up. It says, rise, take up your bed and walk. So Jesus doesn't ask any more questions. I think Jesus knew what was going on with this gentleman. And immediately the man was made whole, took up his bed, and walked. Now, did the man say thank you? Is there any recorded gratitude here? Nope. Jesus tells him to get up, and he gets up and walks out. Interesting. I think if I had been in that condition for 38 years, I would have at least said thank you and inquired a little bit more about who this gentleman was that was standing there talking to me. But there's nothing recorded. And that day was the Sabbath. Oh my. We've done healed somebody on the Sabbath. And if you have read through those pages in your Sunday School quarterly that I had mentioned earlier about some of the Sabbath rules, you could understand that where they were coming from. The Jews therefore said to him who was cured, it is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your bed. Carrying your bed on the Sabbath is a no-no because that is work. Now, if you read carefully in Exodus chapter 20, it says, verse 8, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. Now, what is work? And that's what this boils down to, is being healed, carrying your mat on the Sabbath work.
We
Apparently
did
they
not
thought
cook.
so.
We did not cook on Sunday. We cooked Saturday
to prepare for Sunday, because that was work, for the mother to cook and make meals and everything.
And there are a lot of people today that cook stuff on Saturday, put it in the fridge or wherever they store stuff, and they get it out and eat it on Sunday.
I have an electric range, a GE range, and it can be programmed that the stove will not even come on Sundays. Isn't that weird? I didn't know it till after we bought it.
Well, if you go to Israel and stay in a motel on the Sabbath, the elevators don't work. You have to go use the stairs on Sunday in Israel.
That seems like more work than pushing a button though to go up in an elevator. Doesn't it?
Yes, but you have to remember how far you can walk on the Sabbath.
1 mile.
Right, 1 mile. So you get your exercise that 1 mile going up and down the stairs.
How do you determine as a mile?
If you read in the Old Testament the number of furlongs and do what we think is a furlong, convert a furlong to feet, and then do the multiplication, that's how you get there.
I don't remember reading a Sabbath day's journey. That's what I was getting at.
A Sabbath day journey is about a mile. And if you read further, it tells you how long.
5,280 feet.
Oh, we got some good mathematicians in there.
But, yeah, so, the whole thing is what is considered work. And Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath, as we're going to find out. And he's going to say, I healed this guy. It's okay. And he can go on. Because if you notice in the Old Testament, if your ox gets in the ditch on the Sabbath, you're allowed to get the ox out of the ditch. But you can't do anything else. So there's some wiggle room, we'll say, on this. But the Pharisees, the oral tradition had gotten way beyond what the Bible said. And that's the whole problem.
I read over those things that it said you can do and can't do, and I don't know how they can do anything without sitting somehow. I mean, there's so much stuff you can't do that I don't know how you exist.
And that's the whole point of that, is if you read through those pages and read through that and you think they must have spent, 8 hours in prayer for all the sins they had committed doing all that stuff. I mean, and that's what we're getting into here, is they took something very simple. On it you shall not do any work. And they expanded work way out of what the intent was. They didn't want people out plowing the field and those kinds of things. But, humane things, I mean, you could get your ox out of the ditch, but you couldn't heal anybody. Well, is that not taking care of someone? I mean, I think the oral law, and that was the whole point, the oral law had gotten way out of hand with what the intent of the scripture was.
To me, it's hard to stick by somebody's particular rules that's been written like that. And we look at this situation here, and we stay in our Bible, and we do as Jesus would do, we can't be going wrong. Jesus showed both pity and compassion on Sunday, and he healed that man. So we have to stay in the Word, listen to the Word, and hear our heart, and pray that God guides us, and ask Him what He wants us to do in our next steps.
Right.
And He won't put us down for that if we, as back to that point of who walked away from the church. If we stay in the Word and we read the Bible in the morning and the evening and say that prayer and put our faith in Him, I think we'll be all right.
Right. And I agree with that, David. And that day was the Sabbath. The Jews therefore said to him who was cured, "It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your bed." Now, find that in the Old Testament. You won't. There's nothing in the Old Testament that says you can't carry your bed. It says work. But I think work means like plowing the garden, baling hay, chopping wood, those kinds of things that are real work. But I don't think, carrying your bed on the Sabbath to go home is wrong.
You know, what comes to mind to me is nitpicking.
Ooh, I like that word, nitpicking.
Nitpicking. And also, do you think that some of these rules were made in order for the Pharisees to have a little bit more control?
Oh, absolutely.
Kind of similar to what we live in today.
Ooh, I like that. Yes, it sort of has that kind of.
Rules for me, but not for thee.
That's right. Who the rules for? He answered them, He who made me well said to me, take up your bed and walk. He says, this guy over here told me to do it. I'm past the blame. It's not my fault. He told me to do it, so I just did it. Then they asked him, who is the man who said to you, take up your bed and walk? But the one who was healed did not know who it was. So he didn't know who Jesus was. So he's sitting here, the guy gets healed and doesn't ask any questions, just gets up and walks away. No thank you, no conversation. And folks, I think if I had been healed, I'd want to have a conversation with that person. It says, for Jesus had withdrawn, a great multitude being in that place. So we see, okay, the guy comes in, he's getting questioned, and he's blaming Jesus. He did it. Verse 14, afterwards Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, see, you have been made whole. Okay, so the guy is physically well now. Now we come to the controversial part. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. Oh my. So we find out now that some sin in this man's life caused this. Now, the question is, we read where one man was blind for life, and the disciple said, well, who sinned? Jesus said, nobody. The condition is here for the glory of God. So in one instance, it's part of God's plan to bring glory to God. In this case, it was caused by sin. And then the question comes up, how do you know the difference? And sometimes we don't. The person who's involved may know, like the guy that was born blind, he couldn't have sinned because he was born that way. This guy obviously had sinned and had the problem.
But a lot of times back then too, if you were born with some affliction like that, people thought it was because your parents sinned or there was a big sin in that family and that's why that person was affected like that.
Right.
I don't know whether that was the case here, but I know a lot of religions believed that back then.
Oh, yeah. They believed that. And you can tell by the questions that the disciples asked about the man born blind. They asked, was this guy or his parents sin? And Jesus said, no. It's for the glory of God. And Jesus gave him his sight back, and God got the glory out of it. In this case, it was brought about by sin.
But you know, there's a place in the Bible where it talks about the father's sins will be visited on the children.
Right. And
The consequences will continue.
yes. I mean, it's in the Bible. And it's like over in 1 Corinthians, it talks about the partaking of the Lord's Supper unworthily. And Paul goes on to say, some of you are sick and have various infirmities because you've taken unworthily. Once again, sin has consequences. And that's what the crux of the lesson is. Because of whatever sin it was, he had gotten this infirmity. And now Jesus comes by and says, it's time to be made whole. So the first time, Jesus comes and meets him, and this time he comes and saves him. He said, sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. So Jesus tells him, you're healed, don't sin anymore. And in verse 15, the man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. So now this man knows who Jesus is. And Jesus talked to him about sin and has made him whole. And we don't know any more about this man's life, but I'm sure he led a different life after this experience. After that, because of what God had done through Jesus. And then in verse 16, for this reason, the Jews persecuted Jesus and sought to kill him because he had done these things on the Sabbath. So now the opposition begins against Jesus here. He broke the oral traditions of the religious leaders, and now they're unhappy. And they will continue to be for the next several years. They will be unhappy with Jesus and seek to kill him because he put away their oral traditions, what they thought and what they believed. And it's going to be a tough road ahead for Jesus. And then in verse 17, but Jesus answered them, my Father, oh my. When he says, as soon as he says my Father, now he's talking about deity, his deity. My Father has been working until now, and I have been working. So now he claims deity. And that was blasphemy because they did not believe Jesus to be the Messiah. So now they have two reasons. Number one, that he was doing work on the Sabbath. The next, he was claiming to be the Son of God. And that really upset them because they were looking for a conquering king to come about, not a servant. And in verse 18, therefore the Jews sought all the more to kill him because he not only broke the Sabbath, but also said that God was his Father, making himself equal to God. So now the opposition begins. And then I want to close in verse 24. It says, most assuredly, this is Jesus talking, I say to you, he who hears my word and believes in him who sent me has everlasting life and shall not come into judgment, but has passed from death into life. So Jesus is here. He does this great miracle, heals this gentleman, and now is the persecution begins. And then we'll see next week people begin to stop following Jesus. Does anyone have a question or a comment? Okay, last week, Mr. Tuttle brought up a suggestion that we start meeting at 9:30 instead of 9:45 because you have a long-winded teacher and we usually have several things to discuss. So that would give us a few more minutes to keep me out of the pastor's doghouse, which I stay in anyway. Anyway, what is the thoughts of the class? 9:45 or 9:30? I'm open.
Well, we were late getting out of church this morning, but we're not always late.
Yes, I noticed that, and I'm talking to Pastor Craig about it later.
However, they did get out 5 minutes earlier than they did last week.
Yeah.
Craig and I trade barbs quite regularly on who was long-winded more.
I just suggested giving us an extra 15 minutes because of being able to get our prayer list in and things we want to discuss
And get
and
this
stuff
set
like
up.
that. However, anybody that goes to the first service is not gonna get here until 9:45, so, but I still think that extra 15 minutes makes a difference on this.
Right, and but since we do not have to wait now for another class to vacate the room.
Yeah,
We could come at 9:30, whoever
yeah.
wants to sit, have a little bit of sharing time. And then you can start when you think everybody's here. I have some friends who go to a Hispanic church, and she said, we don't have a regular time to start, we start when everybody's there. I don't know how they determine who everybody's gonna come, but that's what she said, they have a different mindset as far as.
And that's true. There's a lot of people that do things differently, and like I said, I'm flexible on my Sunday school.
All those want to come in at 9:30, raise your hand.
That suits me. That suits me.
All
Well,
those
why
opposed?
don't we just say the room will be open at 9:30, if you can get here then, fine. If
That
you
works
can't,
even better.
9:45.
Right, and like I said, and seriously, I do understand sometimes Craig has things going on out there that needs to be communicated, and he goes over a minute or two, and I'm fine with that. So him and I constantly are jabbing at each other, but that's okay. We're good friends. So next week, for those that can and want to, we'll be here at 9:30. And we'll see where it goes and how it progresses. And it's not set in stone. If we need to shift a little bit, we can. I'm fine with that.
Well, what we do is not start the lesson until 9:45.
Right, but we can have our social time and all that.
What we're gonna eat.
Yeah, make sure because next Sunday we'll know a lot more about where we're going to meet and so forth.
And that room may be repaired by the time.
Right, and like I said, that's the reason, it's an ongoing thing as to that. Now, our prayer list, remember our folks down in Griffin. I sent out some emails about the Georgia Baptist Disaster Relief Fund and all of that. We're trying to help those folks in the Griffin area that got hit with the tornadoes and so forth. So please remember those efforts. And they're collecting different things. You saw on the email there was a list of clothing items that you had that if you could donate and so forth. It's a tough time for those folks. And they are, Griffin's not that far from here. So let's be sure and remember that. What about the rest of the people on our prayer list? How's Rory Rogers doing?
He's going, getting ready to go back in to clean out the other dents. He had part of them done, now he's going back in for the others.
Okay, so he's still battling his
Yeah.
his heart problems. So
You
And-
roll over all his stomach issues.
No, he's got ongoing problems with it. And I still have an unspoken prayer request
okay,
pending.
and David Mitchell, you had several on the prayer list. How are they doing?
Everybody's holding their own. The young man that had the bypass is doing real well. He in his early 50s, and we've heard from him, and they're doing well. I haven't heard back from the young lady that had the stroke yet, but they'll let me know something.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's remember all these on our prayer list, and like I said, the folks down in Griffin and so forth. Let's remember them, and let me. Well,
I want to mention one more thing.
Yes, sir.
Everybody knows that my first wife Nancy died of kidney failure. Her brother, who is I consider still my brother-in-law, is 89. And I talked to him the other day, and he told me he's going on dialysis.
Does he live locally?
No,
Michigan.
Toledo.
Oh, Toledo.
That's one for you and your bride. Thank you.
My daughter, granddaughter, who's been having quite a few problems, is doing much better. I told her it was because of our class. Thank you.
Now, this is a simple crossword, but the get you part is the two why questions at the end. And I realize with the number of people, I'm going to get a lot of different opinions, but I think we need to think